Hey everyone, greetings. It's Naomi Wolf. I will just launch right into it. I have not been reading the Geneva Bible 1560 or the Masoretic text or the RSV, which those of you who follow these readings know that I like to compare. I always compare. Uh, Honestly, I took a break from it because the world has been so strange. From the time that just before Christmas, drones started to appear all over the Northeast. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. And other parts of the country, to the strange fog that gripped the earth subsequent to that, and now the catastrophic burning of Los Angeles and the hills behind Los Angeles and Pasadena, Altadena. I grew up in California. I'm a California girl. It's all so traumatic. And, I too, like anyone, kind of don't understand what God is up to. And it's a little harder at times like this. Maybe it should be easier, but for me, it's a little harder to trust God, have faith in God. I don't get what's up with God right now, honestly. And by the way, I just want to say about that many Christian and particularly Catholic friends of mine um, and loved ones don't have that discourse, right? Like arguing with God or questioning God. And I've said this before, but I'll say it again for people who are new to this journey, these discussions. Judaism very much, as you saw all the way back to Genesis and Exodus, has a deep, deep tradition of arguing with God and questioning God. It's much more, as you keep seeing in these readings from the Hebrew, a family relationship in which, absolutely people like Jacob and Abraham and Moses are like, what is this? God, I don't understand. What do you mean to do here? And even negotiating with God, as Abraham did twice in trying to save the lives of people that God was sort of done with. So it's a very different Judaism and Christianity, and I'm speaking in very broad brushes. And of course, only some Christian denominations, and not all. Well, I would say all Judaism. It's a very different approach to faith and kind of obedience. And I personally don't know that I mean, being myself, I don't know what it's like to not be Jewish, but I don't think when I look at how faith is often defined, especially in the 16th century, as complete unquestioning, acceptance of God's will, uh, just the unquestioning part, or with the Roman Catholic Church, the unquestioning, the notion of infallibility. I'm just being honest. I can't do it, right? It doesn't work for me. It's not intuitive for me. That may just be because I was born and raised Jewish and I don't know any other way. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but to me, I think this is why Judaism has been such a kind of thorn in the side of so many cultures, but also such, in a way, inspiring um, intellectual tradition and as well as religious tradition, also to many cultures, because I do think it's human to question. I personally think God made us to question. As you see from the original Hebrew, God isn't positioning us in the original Hebrew as these kind of blind followers. I don't think God wants zombies, and the Hebrew does not suggest that God wants zombies. I think God wants a good, free and frank exchange with his creation, with his family, his human family. That's what comes up over and over, as we've seen throughout Genesis and Exodus. So all that brings me to my particular moment here, which is I am confessing that I, took a step back, partly because Genesis and Exodus are, great poetry, great, amazing stories. Leviticus can be heavy sledding, from my past readings. And so I'm not proud of this, but part of my kind of delaying picking up Leviticus was just literary hesitation. But I also trust by now that even the passages that are, as we've seen with these very detailed passages in Exodus, at the end of Exodus, about how to build the temple of meeting, how to build the tabernacle, the little details of the tabernacle. I'm going to trust that even very difficult or seemingly uninspiring sections of Leviticus and the books that follow will have deeper meanings as we wrestle with them and go through them. But also, I will confess that what drove me to pick it up again is desperation, because California is burning, and I have friends there. I've been on podcasts for the last 2 days with people in California who see the fires outside their window. I'm a little worried because so many people seem to be in shock, and it's understandable because California is trying to teach people learned helplessness, it seems to me, but I'm very alarmed that people seem frozen almost. Brian says that's a normal shock reaction, but I have people I love very much in LA. I'm worried about them, trying to get them out, and the whole visitation of this catastrophic fire, which seems, I'll just, say it, so unnatural to me as someone who's grown up in California. There were always forest fires. They never behaved like this. They didn't look like this. The smoke wasn't orange. The firefighters never had no water. The mayor was never in Ghana, during fire season. It's just insane. And it does, I guess I'm just going to conclude before we launch in is, it seems like the front of war against us, war against American citizens, is opening in a new way, right? I almost feel like they tried Maui. It's an island. It's not on the mainland. Okay, that worked from an evil globalist point of view. Now it's hit the mainland. I read it as an attack on the mainland. I'm not asking you to believe me or agree with me. I don't know, who's behind it. I think that's a very dense question. But what we do know, or what I believe, is that in addition to whatever human or nefarious globalist or, tech bro or directed energy weapon or organic mismanagement of fires or organic corruption, I'm noticing that Scott Morrison, the former premier of Australia in 2019, was on vacation when beautiful, important, protected parts of Australia burned. And they ran out of water, and they didn't activate firefighting planes that in a treaty they had a reciprocal relationship with in the United States. The National Forest Service, I did reporting on this, and the National Forest Service said they were waiting for the call to go over and put out the fires in Australia, and it didn't come. So it's very much the same kind of horrific, not developed world allowing a catastrophe to unfold, whatever the organic or inorganic cause of it, the same kind of, and you saw this in Canada too, multiple fires, in addition to the, initially allegedly organic ones, arson, multiple fires are being set now in LA, but whoever is doing or not doing it, interesting, Top Cat says Maui mayor or governor was in Boston. That's super interesting. Hey parents, I have an early Christmas and holiday gift for you. We've all been there. 1 minute your child is bouncing off the walls, perfectly healthy, and an hour later, this child is very sick. You feel helpless, and it can turn your plans upside down, especially on vacation. After thousands of customer requests, the wellness company has just launched the Kids Emergency Medical Kit. You no longer have to deal with emergency illnesses in a panic. Now you can have 6 critical medications at your fingertips to treat 20 plus illnesses for issues children have, such as strep throat, ear infections, lice, and respiratory illnesses. You can avoid urgent care and hospitals. The Kids Emergency Kit has been hand-selected by the wellness company's medical board and includes chewable amoxicillin, dissolvable ivermectin, and an optional EpiPen and more. This also includes a detailed guidebook guiding you step by step in emergencies. Ordering this kit is simple. Only parents can order for their children. Fill out an intake form and you will get a verification call for consent. Then it's delivered to your door. Don't wait till you're in the middle of a crisis and avoid late night urgent care runs. Order your kid's emergency kit today and remove panic from your life. And if one or two of the prescriptions run out, there's a replenishment option to restock only what you need. Go to dailyclouthealth.com and grab your kid's emergency kit right now. Use code DailyClout to save up to $40 at checkout. These kits are only available in the USA. Thank you. And Stephen Moore says North Carolina, thank you, and LA so far. That's right. So I think big picture, in my view, this is the second attack on the homeland, right? And if you're counting all of North America, maybe the fires in Canada, this makes it the third or fourth attack on the North American homeland of this kind. So lots of questions I don't pretend to answer. But I guess behind all of it, I am convinced is a spiritual battle, right? I don't know how to read it any other way. And if either God exists, in which case there's a meaning here. And I'm not saying it's an easy meaning, right? Or God doesn't exist. And this is all random, battle for resources, like a Darwinian struggle. I personally think God exists. So let's go ahead. So I'll just finish my, initial rant. Last night I couldn't sleep. I was very worried about people I really love who are still in LA and not leaving. And I'm worried that nothing in LA is normal. And my instinct, and I've been warning about this for months, is that in the wake of the fire devastation, there's going to be kind of an unleashing of cartels and tren de agua and and looting. And I'm also, and when you get that total breakdown of civil society, it's so dangerous, and it's very hard to put together again, which is what Americans really don't understand. And Americans who vote for things like sanctuary cities or defunding the police, they've never lived in a community in which there's no law and order. I have been to such countries like Sierra Leone right after the Civil War, where there was no law and order, and it is absolutely terrifying. Militias become law and order, and that means women and children are at absolute mercy of armed men going from place to place. Their men can't protect them. It's so terrifying. So Americans obviously have to wake up is number one. The fact, I won't make a political point right now. It's not the right time. But where I'm going with why I'm back at my desk, about to read Leviticus, is I was asking God last night, what is up? What am I supposed to take from this? I can't sleep. I don't understand. This is so scary. Because, as my friend in LA said, nothing's safe, right? Like, why should she leave? Because nothing's safe. And I couldn't argue with her because we don't know what's going to happen next. And it's clearly like such an unprecedented time. Arguably in 10 days, we're going to get a new president, God willing, safely sworn in. But it's a time that is fraught with danger until that can happen, until there's a peaceful transfer of real power, and the inhabitants of the White House and the Department of Defense and Homeland Security and the intelligence community that are in on whatever's happening right now are cleared out, and new people who hopefully are, have an allegiance to the United States and the rule of law are in. It is a time of tremendous danger. I'm not going to lie to you. I've been telling you this for 2 years, and here we are, right? Those of you who follow me know I've been saying right now, in the run up to the election and then in the run up to the inauguration, it's going to be catastrophic. There are going to be disruptions. fires, explosions, cyber attacks, looting. I said all of that. I told you all. I told you to get your water and food supplies, remember? And I sounded like a crazy person, but here we are. So listen to me. All right. So now I'm saying I was turning to God, and, whom I hadn't really felt a connection to for some time, since I stopped reading the Bible, actually. And I said, I don't get it. I'm so distraught. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to keep anyone safe. I don't know why this is happening. What did we do, right? Why are you so mad at us? And I got a very clear, I'm not saying God talks to me, although I think God clearly talks to everyone. The Bible, the Hebrew Bible shows that God talks to everyone. But I definitely got this very clear, and it wasn't very chatty, right? It was very almost stern. Read my word. So I'm picking up with Leviticus 1 because I don't want to, ignore God. And I will tell you, freaky, what is Leviticus 1? It's about burnt offerings. So here we go. And I'm not saying LA is that, but I am saying that Leviticus 1 starts with burning. Okay. Let's get into the Geneva Bible 1560. And those of you who are new to this journey, it is the Dissidents Bible. People risk their lives to create this Bible. English translators from the Hebrew fled England, where they would be martyred in the persecution against Protestants in the 16th century, and they created this very accurate translation in Geneva, Switzerland, because they couldn't do it in England. And it is transformational. It's the Puritans' Bible. It's Shakespeare's Bible. It's the founders' Bible of our country. And if you've been on this journey, that it is very radically different than even the King James Bible or any translations that followed. And the key differences are, and this is why I think the Puritans could do what they did, the founders could do what they did, maybe Shakespeare could do what he did, because it radically manifests the right of every individual to have an intimate relationship directly with God, with no mediators, and also the role of every individual in manifesting God's wishes on earth without mediators. So it's a very empowering text compared to translations. All right, here we go. Now, the Lord called Moses and spoke unto him out of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, and just remind everyone, we ended Exodus with the building of the tabernacle, also called the Mishkan, which means like place of meeting, place of presence, essentially, and the details of how God wanted to live among his people in that structure, travel with them, and so on. Speak unto the children of Israel, and you shall say unto them, if any of you offer a sacrifice unto the Lord, you shall offer your sacrifice of cattle, of ewes, which I think is ewes, and of the sheep. And if his sacrifice be a burnt offering of the herd, he shall offer a male without blemish, presenting him of his own voluntary will at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before the Lord. And the note says, so they could offer of none other sort, but of those which were commanded. And he shall put his hand upon the head of the burnt offering, and it shall be accepted to the Lord to be his atonement. And he shall kill the bullock before the Lord, and the priests, Aaron's sons, shall offer the blood, and shall sprinkle it round about upon the altar that is by the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Then shall he flay the burnt offering and cut it in pieces. So the sons of Aaron the priest shall put fire upon the altar and lay the wood in order upon the fire. Then the priests, Aaron's sons, shall lay the parts in order, the head and the caul which I believe means gall, like membrane, um, or fat rather, upon the wood that is in the fire, which is upon the altar. But the inwards thereof, meaning the intestines, and the legs thereof, he shall wash in water, and the priest shall burn all on the altar, for it is a burnt offering, an oblation made by fire, for a sweet savor unto the Lord. And if his sacrifice for the burnt offering be of the flock, as of the sheep or of the goats, he shall offer a male without blemish. And the note says, or a savor of rest which pacifies the anger of the Lord. And he shall kill it on the north side of the altar before the Lord, and the priests, Aaron's sons, shall sprinkle the blood thereof round about upon the altar. And he shall cut it in pieces, separating his head and his caul, and the priest shall lay them in order upon the wood that lies in the fire which is on the altar. But he shall wash the inwards and the legs with water, and the priest shall offer the whole and burn it upon the altar, for it is a burnt offering, an oblation made by fire, for a sweet savor unto the Lord. And if his sacrifice, excuse me, and if his sacrifice be a burnt offering to the Lord of the fowls, meaning birds, then he shall offer his sacrifice of the turtle doves or of the young pigeons. And the priest shall bring it unto the altar, and wring the neck of it asunder, and burn it on the altar, and the blood thereof shall be shed upon the side of the altar. And the note says the Hebrew word signifies to pinch off with the nail. And he shall pluck out his maw and his feathers, and cast them up beside the altar on the east part in the place of the ashes. And the note says, on the side of the court gate, in the parts which stood with ashes. And he shall cleave it with his wings, meaning cut it, but not divide it asunder in half. And the priest shall burn it upon the altar, upon the wood that is in the fire, for it is a burnt offering, an oblation made by fire, for a sweet savor unto the Lord. And let's do chapter 2. And the subhead says the meat offering is after 3 sorts: fine flour unbaken, of bread baken, and of corn in the ear. So 3 kinds of food offerings. And when any will offer a meat offering unto the Lord, his offering shall be of fine flour, and he shall pour oil upon it and put incense thereon. And the note says, because the burnt offering could not be without the meat offering. And shall bring it unto Aaron's sons, the priests, and he shall take thence his handful of the flour and of the oil with all the incense, and the priest shall burn it for a memorial upon the altar, for it is an offering made by fire, for a sweet savor unto the Lord. And the note says, to signify that God remembers him that offers. Now, I'm going to pause to say, please pay attention to this use of memorial and God remembers, because we've talked about this in the past. In Hebrew, to remember isn't literally like God forgot who you were and this is reminding him. It's to hold someone even more closely in one's heart. Okay. To center one's attention on someone. All right. But the remnant of the meat offering shall be Aaron's and his sons, for it is most holy of the Lord's offering made by fire. And the note says, therefore none could eat of it, as it is the priest's. If you bring also a meat offering baked in the oven, it shall be an unleavened cake of fine flour mingled with oil, or an unleavened wafer anointed with oil. But if your meat offering be an oblation of the frying pan, it shall be a fine flour unleavened mingled with oil. And the note said, which is a gift offered to God to pacify him. And you shall part it in pieces and pour oil thereon, for it is a meat offering. And if your meat offering be an oblation made in the cauldron, it shall be made of fine flour with oil. After you shall bring the meat offering, it is made of these things unto the Lord, and shall present it unto the priest, and he shall bring it to the altar. And the priest shall take from the meat offering a memorial of it, and shall burn it upon the altar, for it is an oblation made by fire for a sweet savor unto the Lord. And pay attention to these repetitions. But that which is left of the meat offering shall be Aaron's and his sons, for it is most holy of the offerings of God made by fire. All the meat offerings which you shall offer unto the Lord shall be made without leaven, meaning yeast. For you shall neither burn leaven nor honey in any offering of the Lord made by fire. In the oblation of the first fruits you shall offer them unto the Lord, but they shall not be burnt upon the altar for a sweet savor. And the note says, that is, fruits which are sweet as honey you may offer. All the meat offerings also shall you season with salt, neither shall you suffer, meaning allow, the salt of the covenant of your God to be lacking from your meat offering, but upon all your oblations you shall offer salt. If then you offer a meat offering of your first fruits unto the Lord, you shall offer for your meat offering of your first fruits ears of corn dried by the fire, and wheat beaten out of the green ears. After you shall put oil upon it, and lay incense thereon, for it is a meat offering. And the priest shall burn the memorial of it, even of that is beaten, and of the oil of it, with all the incense thereof, for it is an offering unto the Lord made by fire. And the note says about G, G, but reserved for the priests. Okay, so that reiterates that some of this is reserved for the priests. H says, which then were bound as by a covenant to use in all sacrifices. I think that refers to salt. Or it means a sure and pure covenant. That's really interesting. Let's see if that is the end of this chapter in Leviticus. Just figuring out how to flip right on this digital version. And that is the end of the second chapter of Leviticus. By the way, many people have asked me, where do you find the 1560 Geneva Bible? I don't know if this is a new development. It used to be that you had to send away for a gigantic hard copy, beautiful facsimile version of it. And not everyone can afford that, especially at times like these. So I'm glad to tell you that if you go to archive.org, you can look for Geneva Bible 1560. Make sure that it is the 1560 version. And because, of course, it was revised later. This is the original 1560. It's important. And you have a beautiful facsimile digitally, which is actually really handy for me, because I sometimes travel and can't bring that giant hardcover text with me. So that's Leviticus 1 and 2. And, we're still in the space that we inhabited at the end of Exodus, in which God is basically saying what he needs from us in order to live with us, among us, not above us, not far away, but literally, this is what I need to be with you in the tabernacle as you move through the world, because the tabernacle is portable. As you recall, they're going to carry it through the desert all the way to the land of Canaan that was promised to them by God. Excuse me. So, the end of Exodus was talking about the physical apartment, basically, that he was furnishing for himself through the actions of Aaron and his sons, the Kohanim, the priests. But now God is talking about something kind of different but related. And I never really understood it until I read it in Hebrew in context. And I'm not sure I understand it fully now. But sacrifice got abstracted away from individuals, right? I mean, you got to go back in time to this desert period I guess, about 4,000 years ago. All religions sacrificed at that time, all cults sacrificed. And you remember that the competing cult, the really dangerous cults that continually seduced the children of Israel were Baal, which you would sacrifice children to Baal, Malach, you'd also sacrifice humans and animals, and Asherah, or Ashtaroth, the fertility goddess. All of them took sacrifices. And sacrifices were part of worship. This continued for millennia in the ancient world and then into the classical world. Greeks sacrificed, Romans sacrificed, right? So what happened to what I never cared about these descriptions of sacrifice, which you read about, on the High Holy Days, because by the time I received rabbinical Judaism, which is what these practices had descended to, after the Exodus in 70 AD, when Jerusalem was destroyed and Jews and Judaism was sort of exiled around the world, and there was no temple, right? But in the temple period, sacrifice got abstracted away, and we'll get to that, from individuals. So I never knew that this was really an individual obligation, because by then you'd bring your offering to the priests at the temple, or you'd pay for, and this Jesus got very upset about this, as we'll mention in a minute, but by the time of the first and second temples, which come later, right? Solomon and then David, you're not sacrificing anything yourself. It's far away. You have to make a pilgrimage if you don't live in Jerusalem. And by Jesus's time, you're probably, as I understand it, not even bringing your own, goat, your own sheep, your own doves that you've chosen without blemish from your flock. You're literally going on a pilgrimage and then paying, remember the money changers around the temple who sat outside of the courtyard, basically selling animals for sacrifice. And Jesus overturned their tables. So to me, and then after the demise of the temple, the destruction of the temple, the second temple, we Jews were told, we don't sacrifice in the same way because there's no temple, right? And so we only have kind of symbolic sacrifice. For example, it's so interesting how these ancient practices descend in very vestigial form, but don't really go away. The memory of them remains. For instance, at Passover, the Paschal lamb is a lamb shank that is burnt. And when I was a child, I'd be fascinated because my mom or dad would, my dad, probably remembering his Orthodox Jewish upbringing, would burn this lamb bone that you get from the butcher over the gas ring on the stove. And that's kind of one of the most primitive things that happened in our house, right? It's like, he's burning a lamb shank. And that would be placed on the Passover Seder plate that sits in the middle of the Passover Seder. And then I'm fast forwarding a lot, but Jesus, the last meal he had was a Passover Seder before he was crucified, Yeshua. And then he became, in later Christian iconography, and even in his own words, right, identified as a sacrifice, as the Paschal lamb. So this tradition of sacrifice descends all the way into Christianity. And all the way into modern Judaism, but it's different, right? And I would say in Judaism, very abstracted. I would say in Christianity, very abstracted too, but we can get to that. Whereas, how did it begin? What is the original instruction? The original instruction is everyone listening, all of you, take your dove, take your chicken, bring it to me. And remember where we are. And for those of you who have not been following us, just a little reminder, we're not, like, the tabernacle isn't far away on a hilltop. It's not, a church or a synagogue that you need permission to enter, or you need to tithe in order to enter. It's right in the camp. It's right in the middle of where everyone is living in the desert, right? It's among the people. And remember, which was so mind-blowing, I didn't realize it, you're allowed in the tabernacle. You're not allowed in the Holy of Holies unless you're the priest, Aaron or his sons, because probably the context is because you could die, right? Because God is just so goddish and humans are so humanish, and it's dangerous for humans. It's not that God doesn't want to hang out. God is trying to find ways to hang out without, destroying people. But you are invited into the courtyard, which again is not a physical courtyard. Remember, it's a space marked off by fabrics at this point, right? So you can come in, you can open the curtain, go into the outer enclosure. Really, remember, in Hebrew it's chatzer, which means yard. It's nothing abstract, right? It's nothing elevated. You can sit in God's yard, like front yard, and you can bring your chicken, you can bring your turtle dove, if you can afford it, you can bring your lamb or your goat, and that you've chosen without blemish, and give it to the priest, because that's his job. He sacrifices it, but it is a memorial of you, right, to God. It's a gift of you to God. And this very much picks up a theme of the decoration of the tabernacle. Remember, where people were giving voluntarily their earrings, their bracelets, their utensils of precious metals to make God's decorations that he loved, the pomegranates and the bells, the golden bells. And there was that sense of voluntary giving. And that's what God wants, right? He doesn't want to drag your tithe from you. He doesn't want to drag your 10% that you can't afford, right? And in this context now with the sacrifice, he doesn't need your goat, right? He doesn't need your chicken, your turtle dove. He doesn't eat the way humans eat, obviously, but and you remember it said voluntary, their voluntary will. And I'm really interested to see what language is used for that in the Hebrew. He wants the gift, the giving, the emotion of the giving. And it's so intimate in the original. The sacrifice is not like, it's not about the priest. The priest is literally, and this comes up a lot, and I don't mean to offend any Kohanim or priests or rabbis, but respectfully, in the very beginning, the priest was a facilitator, really a servant of God, and a servant of the process, and a servant of the people. He was receiving the animals. He had to slaughter them in a ritualistic way. He had to, arrange their limbs in a certain way for the sweet savor to the Lord. But he's not the guy who is the gatekeeper to God. That just isn't true. He doesn't have any special magical powers that give him dominion over human beings, over other human beings. It's really important to understand. So there's this incredible intimacy in what God wants from people. And and I can see this, right? God doesn't need your earrings. God doesn't need your sheep. But I can see that, this is for our own sake, right? If we are losing ourselves to narcissism and we're absorbed in how beautiful we look with our gold earrings, are you willing to give up your gold earrings for God, to make God happy? That probably does something good to us if we really think about it and wrestle and like, yeah, I'd rather make God happy than keep my gold earrings. It's not, God isn't happy about your gold earrings. He's happy about you wanting to make him happy, right? And by the same token, God doesn't need your sheep, right? So clear. But eating and food and sheep and fowls, birds and goats are such the measure of wealth in a desert nomadic society, right? But it's also food. It's your food, right? It's not your pet or your abstract livestock. It's literally your food every day. So, and your milk. So God is saying, will you share your food with me? And I used to puzzle over that phrase, a sweet savor to the Lord. Because is he really so weird that, he needs people to kill their animals so that he can enjoy the sweet savor of burning, in the very abstracted version of God that we were all taught, or I'll say that I was taught, that goes along with the weirdness and abstractness of God. Oh, he just wants to smell the smoke from us burning our livestock. It seems kind of random. That's not how it comes through in this accurate translation. It's what makes it sweet is the willingness to share, right? That humans are like, he just wants to hang out with us, right? He wants to sit at our table basically and share our food, share the instinct of our food, right? Um, he wants to know that we would share our food with him. He's the one in charge of the food, right? He can dump, and Jesus tried to explain this. He can dump 1,000 goats on you, right? If you share your little morsel of goat with him. But he wants that relationship of sharing, of reciprocity, right? Of mutual love, voluntary reciprocity, like the way a child offers a crayon. Right? He doesn't need the crayon. If you're a parent, you don't need your child's crayon, but it's incredibly sweet and moving. And you have a good relationship with your child if you give your child a whole box of crayons and the child says, here, this is a really beautiful crayon, I want you to have it. I'm going to get teary. Anyway, that's what I take away from these two chapters. Now let's take a look at the Revised Standard Version. I'm going to reverse the order of comparison a little and go with the Revised Standard Version first, see if there are any differences, and then end up with the Hebrew. And so it's called the burnt offering. And what was it called in Leviticus in Hebrew? Well, Leviticus, interestingly, is called Vayikra in Hebrew, which means and he was called, right? So there aren't really chapter titles in the Hebrew per se. So let's go to the burnt offering. Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, it's pretty accurate. He shall offer it at the door of the tent of meeting that he may be accepted before the Lord. All right. Is that what it says? Let's take a look at line 3. He shall offer it at the door of the temple of meeting that he may be accepted before the Lord. It doesn't say that at all. Let's go back. Double check. Let's see. If his sacrifice is a burnt offering from cattle, an unblemished male, he shall bring it. He shall bring it willingly to the entrance of the temple of the meeting before the Lord. And then it goes on in the Hebrew, and he shall lean his hand forcefully upon the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted for him to atone for him. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Did you hear the difference? Let's go back to that. The Revised Standard Version, which again is a modern English translation used, no disrespect to Catholics, in the Catholic Church, says, it's awful. I'm sorry. I just have to be honest. If his offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he shall offer a male without blemish. He shall offer it at the door of the tent of meeting that he may be accepted before the Lord. And then line 4 is, he shall lay his hand upon the head of the burnt offering, and it shall be accepted for him to make atonement for him. So in Hebrew, the first accepting isn't there. I'm going to read it to you in Hebrew. Im ola, im ola karbano, if he brings up his sacrifice, min habakar zachar tamim, from among the cattle, male pure, a pure male, viyakrivenu, and he shall near it, el petach ohel, to the opening of the tent, moed yakriv oto, willingly he will draw it toward the opening of the tent, lirtsono, voluntarily, it's a really interesting word, to his desire. Ratzon is desire. Lirtsono lifnei Adonai, before God. And it doesn't say anything about so he shall be accepted. It implies that it's being accepted. And then the line 4 says, Ve samech, and he'll put yado al rosh, his hand on the head, ha'ole, of the burnt offering, venirtzelo, and it will be wanted to him, lekaper alav, to atone on it. Really different, right? Really different. It's lekaper. It's much more, it will be accepted, is what it says in the Hebrew. There's nothing conditional, right? There's nothing conditional here. I don't want you to feel from these bad translations that God's acceptance of you is conditional. It's not in the Hebrew. Then he shall kill the bull before the Lord, and Aaron's sons, the priest, shall present the blood and throw the blood round about against the altar that is at the door of the tent of meeting. And he shall flay the burnt offering, cut it in pieces. That's all correct. Lay the pieces, entrails, and legs he'll wash with water, a pleasing odor to the Lord. Let's see how that is translated. An offering with a pleasing fragrance to the Lord, line 9. Ve kirbo, ve kra'av, ukra'av, v'yichatz b'mayim, and its innards and its legs he'll wash with water. V'hiktir hakohen, the Kohen will cause to go up, et hakol, all of it, hamizbecha, ola, ise rech nichoach le Adonai. Oh, that's really nice. He'll let the smoke of all the animal on the altar as a burnt offering, a fire offering, will rise up. Reach is, you've seen this word before, it means wind or spirit. So it's like a wind in this case. Nichoach, pleasant. Noach is comfortable. Nichoach l'Adonai, to God. So it is a pleasing wind to God. So that's a much more intimate description of what's happening. And the rest of it is pretty straightforward. The translation, I'm reading the Revised Standard Version. If your offering is a cereal offering, you'll bring it to the altar. All right, let's look at memorial in the second chapter. And the priest shall take from the cereal offering its memorial portion and burn this on the altar, an offering by fire, a pleasing odor to the Lord. And what is left of the cereal offering shall be for Aaron and his sons. It is a most holy part of the offerings by fire to the Lord. Let's see what happens in the Hebrew with chapter 2, line 9. What happens to the memorial? Okay, line 9. Ve'herim, and he shall raise up hakohen, the Kohen. And this is translated as priests. But remember, as I explained to you, initially a Kohen wasn't really a priest in the modern sense. It was just a member of the tribe of Kohen, which is serving in a priestly capacity. And then that became the priestly tribe in Judaism. Min hamincha, from the meal offering. Et azkarta, so this is azkarta, this is the word. Zocher is to remember. So azkarta is like I've talked about this before, but it's like a memorial, but also like if you have a locket and you have a picture of your child, that's what azkarta, like a souvenir almost. V'hiktir hamiz becha ishe reach nichoach le'Adonai. And again, it causes it to go up in smoke on the altar, the meal offering. It is a fire offering with a pleasing fragrance to the Lord. So in Hebrew, it's souvenir, and in the Revised Standard Version in line 9, it's memorial portion. So much more technical, much less emotional in the Revised Standard Version. You shall season all your cereal offerings with salt. You will not let the salt of the covenant with your Lord be lacking from your cereal offering. With all your offerings, you shall offer salt. So that's line 13 in the Revised Standard Version. Let's go to the Hebrew in the Revised Standard Version. And by the way, I'm stumbling a little when I read the Hebrew because it's a lot of vocabulary that is not commonly used, right? That I'm not that familiar with because it's very specific to this. So let's see. V'chol karban, and all the meal offering, like sacrifice, right? Min chatecha, bemelach, in salt from the meal, in salt timlach, you shall salt. You hear that, Hebrew is so beautiful. You hear that kind of echo in the language, bimelach timlach. So it's used as a noun. Melach is in salt. Timlach is you shall salt as a verb, right? So they use it as a noun and then as a verb, and it's just one of the beauties of reading the Hebrew. Velo tashbit melach, and don't omit salt. Brit Elohecha, covenant, your God. So in English, they've translated it sort of expansively, you shall not omit the salt of your God's covenant. In Hebrew, it's much more truncated and, again, more immediate. I'm going to read it again. Velo tashbit, and don't omit, melach, brit Elohecha, salt, covenant, your God. Me'al minchatecha, from being placed on top of your meal offerings. Al kol karbanecha, on all of your sacrifices. Takriv melach, you shall offer salt. So how do I read that? Remember, in the New Testament, Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. Well, I think he's referencing this section of Leviticus, if not other sections we haven't gotten to yet, because, as you know, all of Yeshua's followers knew the Hebrew Bible, these 5 books of Moses, backward and forward, because they heard them week after week after week after week in the oral tradition in the synagogues. And so when he says, you are the salt of the earth, but what if salt has lost its savor? I literally never understood that in the New Testament. Let's look up exactly what Jesus says. Salt of the earth, Jesus. Church of Jesus Christ. What does God mean by, it's interesting when you try to find the text of these sacred books, it's much easier sometimes to find the commentary than the actual, how can I put it, than the actual text. And the text should be primary. Like Google, I think, tries to honestly hide the primary text. I mean, sensibly, quote, you should find the actual text before you find the commentary. So it's Matthew 5:13. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its savor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. And colloquially, when we say, oh, he's the salt of the earth, that comes from this, right? It's come to mean kind of he's a good guy, a decent person, helps his neighbor. But originally, this had a very different meaning, and you see it right here in Leviticus. The salt, your covenant of your God. The salt covenant of your God. So it's literally saying the covenant of Yahweh and the children of Israel is being consecrated or memorialized with these various rituals, the offering of the meal, the food, the olive oil, the flour, the building of the tabernacle, and also this salt. It's symbolic of a covenant, all right? And it also, salt had value at a time when there were no seasonings, practically no spice trade, no cinnamon, being brought from far away, no thyme, right? salt was so valuable. And if you lived far away from the ocean, salt was even more valuable because, someone had to bring it on a camel and dry it and transport it and sell it. So very precious. So God is saying basically here, as I read it, don't check your gifts to me off in a checklist, right? Like, any woman knows that she could be given the most beautiful, expensive diamond ring by her husband or fiance. But if he just, if it's delivered by the secretary, right, or through Amazon, it's not, that says something about how he feels about her, right? As opposed to if he, surprises her, puts it on a plate, unveils it with a napkin, or just gives it to her with a kiss, face to face. Like, there's so many ways to give a gift, and there are routine ways to give a gift. You never care that much about a gift card, right? Even though it's valuable. But you care if someone took the time and the trouble to, draw a picture, write a special memory. So that's how I hear the salt of the covenant in this. You could just like throw the meat in God's direction, you know, check it off. God wanted a dove. Here's a dove, God. But God's also saying, don't forget the salt, like, even though it's precious, you want it, it makes things taste better. Like, treat me like a person. That's how I hear God speaking with this salt. I could be thoroughly making this up, but that's the beauty of Jewish commentary. You get to interpret. And I think you get to interpret, right? Despite what you may have been told. You get to do your best to understand what God was getting at. So I'm also thinking of one other thing. Sometimes I'm asked for food by homeless people or street people, and I make it a point to say, what do you want? And then they're often very detailed about what they want, because I don't think a lot of people do that. So they'll say, could I please have 2 packets of ketchup? Or could I please have, Swiss cheese instead of cheddar cheese? And I'll go in and get the sandwich and the drink or whatever, and follow their directions. And I really feel like I'm closer to God at those moments. And Yeshua certainly said this, right? Than if I just, gave the person random food that had nothing to do with taking a moment to say, like, how do you want your sandwich? Like, that is a way of saying you are a human being. You're not just a body. You're not just someone I feel sorry for. I'm not just checking it off my list because God said I had to be charitable. What an annoyance, right? And so I really think that's what God is getting at. It's not just the giving. It's the motivation, the heart in the giving, the focus in the giving, the love in the giving, right? And again, I don't think these things are for him. I think they're for us. I think he understands that he created super imperfect beings, right? But he loves us in our imperfection. Like, the human state is an imperfect one so that we can grow with him, as it would seem. And so because we're imperfect, he's helping us learn by saying, okay, don't forget the salt, right? So again, that's about us. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not giving with my whole heart. I'm distracted. I'm scrolling on my phone. Let me take a minute to prepare God's meal with my whole heart, make it just the way he likes it. Let him know I really love and appreciate him. And again, that is for us. In spite of so much of Jewish ritual is about that. I mean, when we get to Shabbat, I'll explain that, but it's really not for him, but it is for us to remind us, hey, we've got all these gifts. The best of Christian ritual too, praying before meals, right? Saying grace before meals. That's really not for God. I mean, it's kind of for God, right? It's like, thank you very much. It's better than not saying thank you, but it's also for us because it helps us remember, wow, we are not, we're getting these gifts that we didn't make the earth. We didn't make the food, it was brought to us. We're so lucky. our creator brought it to us, as well as all these other hands involved in the making of it. We're so grateful. And that really takes you out of the mindset of poor me, or I'm entitled, or I'm angry at my, colleague, or all the other things that go through our minds when we're not focused on that moment of a gift, from God to us, from us to God. All right. That's the salt of the earth. And honestly, so when Yeshua says you are the salt of the earth, let's go back to that quote. But if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. Well, now I see he's referencing Leviticus 2, or that's my guess at the very least. And he's saying you, the children of Israel, right? The Jewish people. I mean, the word Jewish didn't exist at that point, but the children of Israel, the tribes of Israel, the followers of Yahweh, you're in this covenant involving salt, right? With Yahweh. He said so. This is part of the covenant, but you're not doing it the right way, right? I mean, that was Yeshua's message, right? You guys are not paying attention to what Yahweh really said. You're getting distracted by this, the religiosities and the letter of the law, and you're forgetting the spirit. And now I understand what he's talking about. If the salt loses its savor, if the people who receive this gift of a covenant involving sacrifice and salt and a tabernacle, all these things, don't really pay attention to what God really wanted, it's meaningless. It's just salt. It's not part of a holy exchange involving love and gifts, right? It's just a mineral that can be trampled underfoot. It doesn't have any value, right? So I never got that, and now I do. So isn't that amazing how understanding the Hebrew Bible can really illuminate the New Testament, because this is Yeshua's Hebrew Bible too. So let's wrap it up. Let's see if there's anything else very important in the second chapter in Hebrew. Then the Cohen shall cause its memorial to go up in smoke, taken from its coarse meal and from its oil with all its frankincense. It is a fire offering to the Lord. Let's see what the Revised Standard Version says. And the priest shall burn as its memorial portion part of the crushed grain and of the oil with all of its frankincense. It is an offering by fire to the Lord. So very different vibe. Let's read the last sentence in Hebrew. Vehiktir hakohen. And the Cohen will cause et azkarata, the souvenir, the memorial, migirsha, to go up, umeshamna al kol levanta ishe le'adonai. Wow, that's got so much internal poetry. I don't know if you could hear it the first time. I'm going to read it again. So beautiful. I mean, what Hebrew does is amazing. Vehiktir hakohen, the Kohen will cause et azkarta migirsha umishamna al kol levnata ishe le'adonai. I hope you heard. Tell me in the comments if you heard that internal poetry, all of those long A sounds. Some of it, I mean, I don't even know how they combine, whoever wrote this, the meaning with the poetry of the Hebrew language. But what you had 4 words with internal long A sounds in sequence, right? And they were meaningful, but it's like the last line of this beautiful chapter, which I thought was going to be a really boring chapter, turns out to be really fascinating, is a series of internal rhymes, opening and opening like gifts inside of gifts, inside of gifts, inside of one sentence. And that reminds me of the end or the climax of putting together the tabernacle, right? The place of meeting, Mishkan, where it was this like triumphant poetry at the end. So what that suggests to me as a literary critic is when you sacrifice in this way and you align with God's will and you offer voluntarily and it's an unblemished offering, why does that matter that it's unblemished? It means that you're not just giving God the leftovers, right? That you can't sell or trade in the open market because there's a flaw. You're giving, again, like the salt, with a whole heart from the very best of what you've got to God, and you're doing it, with goodwill, with free will. No one's forcing you. You've got the salt, you've got the smoke. The smoke is going up to the heavens. You've made it smell beautiful. It's a souvenir to God of you, right? Not of the priest, not of the religion, of you. It's a souvenir of you from your stuff. You're going right to God, to God's consciousness, right? No intermediaries. Then you get this beautiful poetry. So the language suggests that when you're in alignment with God, you are creating a world of harmony and music. At least that's how it sounds in Hebrew. Not so much in English. I'm going to read it again in English. If Leviticus, and the priest shall burn as its memorial portion part of the crushed grain and of the oil with all of its frankincense. It is an offering by fire to the Lord. Very interesting mistranslation there. It's not an offering by fire to the Lord. That, like, the active subjects of this sentence in the Revised Standard Version are the priest and the fire. And the individual is just totally erased from this transaction with God. But in the Hebrew, it's a fire offering to the Lord. And the word fire is esh. So here it's ishe. Kol halvnata ishe laronai. With all its frankincense. It's a fire offering to God. So it's your fire offering to God. So I'll just end there. I hope you see the difference. I know that we're not in a room together, so I can't see your faces, but to me, these differences are so important, really beautiful. And again, I started out last night and this morning feeling pretty sad and confused. And I got, sorry, I'm just letting someone know I'm live. And I got this message, read my word. So I don't know how to connect this to the fires in LA, and maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just leave it there. But I think, let me try to draw a concluding thought without being insensitive or offending anyone. You look at this really delicate elaboration of the relationship God wants with us. And we can ask ourselves, have we done that? We didn't know. You could argue we really didn't know we were supposed to do that or that he was available in that way. But did we even really try to have that kind of relationship, to live that way? I don't think any natural disaster or physical disaster or illness is punishment, right? And I don't think God works like that. But in the Hebrew Bible, I'll just stick to that, he is continually trying to get our attention, and sometimes through natural disasters. So I'm not going to tell anyone suffering in a terrifying situation, I'm not going to lecture or preach, God forbid. But I will just end by saying it does seem like there's some shelter that we can take, even in the most chaotic, crazy, scary times, in aligning with God and seeing what happens then. So let's look at the comments and then I'll wrap it up. Top Cat says it's like offering God our favorite things rather than something we don't care so much about exactly. Offering him our greatest gifts mean more to him. thoroughly, which is why I always cry with the little drummer boy. And I may have mentioned this before, but Jewish folk tales are full of like the little poor shepherd boy, or, random homeless person offering something like playing a flute. Uh, and that's more precious to God than all the other offerings that people have routinely been giving him. Um, and Top Cat says, it keeps our 2 feet on the ground, appreciating where everything comes from to be thankful. Very true. Cheryl Mason says, I appreciate your insight tremendously. Thank you. Oh, Joy Herb says, my sheep hear my voice and I know them and they follow me. Really beautiful, really, really apt. Top Cat says he wants to be part of our lives, our Father. I know this is what keeps emerging from this, which is so written out of contemporary religion. Let's see. And other people are talking about events. Lord, speak to our hearts, says Stephen Moore. Fair enough. I second that emotion. Top Kid says, why do we not offer our Lord Yahweh things now? Do you think it's what he's waiting for to help the good people on this planet? That's a really good question. We have really, all modern religions, I feel, in the West have abstracted out the offering of things. I mean, sometimes you can go to a country like Mexico and you can still see, I was in Santa Fe and I saw there's a little chapel where people were healed by holy water, they believed. And they would offer up their crutches or offer, pictures of their family members who were healed. In the Western Wall, the last remaining wall of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, you put little notes in the cracks of the stone of your prayers, but that's not really offering, is it? Yeah, our offerings have really been abstracted. You offer when there's a plate passed in church, or when you write a check to as a contribution at synagogue, but we're not asked to be devotees anymore, to devote, right? To give something precious to us, precious to God, And honestly, I wonder if that's, I'm not going to say intentional, but if you're going to build religions, right, which I believe are not in the Hebrew Bible, at least not yet, in the way that they developed later, that is sidelining the individual. You'd kind of want to abstract that moment where you're giving God your favorite thing or God's favorite thing, and you get to feel that connection. So maybe we should, Judaism still has, I guess, what you could call devotional moments like that. Even contemporary Judaism, like when you light the candles, bless the wine, bless the bread. But it's not really, we do leave a cup for Elijah. You're right. We don't really give God anything anymore that is concrete, like we're told to in this section of Leviticus. Maybe we should try. I hope it's not idolatry, but maybe we should try. I'm going to think about that. I'm going to solicit some input from some, rabbis and priests and thoughtful people, and see if there's a way to do that. I think it would be very, very, very meaningful. Honestly, I think that's why some people are drawn away from Jewish and Christian religions now to things like, Hinduism, because I remember when I was like visiting a Hindu temple in India, and not only lighting a candle or lighting a little pot of oil, but leaving marigolds in front of an idol, which I'm not supposed to do. But it's very compelling to the human spirit to offer a thing, right? So maybe it's okay to try that. Maybe it's okay to set aside a little bit. We could experiment. I don't know. Is this blasphemous? Set aside a little bit of our food and say, thank you, God, have a drink, have some lamb chop. I don't know, right? I'm getting in out of my depth. I'm not, trained in this at all theologically, but I guess I should just end by saying, I think that instinct to give is very deep in us. And it's right there in the text, right? We're supposed to be doing something we're not doing. So there's some version of it, no doubt, we could incorporate appropriately in our lives. Keeping an attitude and everything gives thanks. All right, you guys, thank you. I need to thank our sponsors at this point, and I have a lovely new set of scripts. So no matter who is in the White House, thanking our sponsor, Birch Gold. The fuse on the economy has been lit. 4 years of a conservative presidency will not be enough to turn the tide on a $35 million national debt. And if the left wins, it's like throwing, oh, I beg your pardon, the left lost. So we still have the $35 trillion national debt. We don't have too much control over the debt, but what we can do is protect our savings by diversifying into gold with the help of Birch Gold Group. For millennia, gold has stood firm in the face of greedy governments, economic upheavals, and global strife, and it can protect us now. Birch Gold will help you convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold, tax-free and penalty-free, and it doesn't cost a penny out of pocket. In the last 4 years, you really need to pay attention to this. The buying power of the US dollar has declined. The price of gold has increased 40%. Is that a coincidence? Text the word daily clout to 989898 for a free information kit on gold, and trust Birch Gold to protect your savings. Text daily clout to the number 989898 today. Native Path. Thank you. Another one of our sponsors. Many people struggle to move easily and independently. I certainly do sometimes. You've got to discover Native Path Collagen, a formula scientifically designed to increase bone mineral density, accelerate tissue recovery, enhance skin and hair, and strengthen weak or damaged nails, and connective tissue. Who wouldn't want more collagen with all these benefits? Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. The best part, there are amazing bundle deals. You can get 3 to 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. Over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee. Native Path is a trusted choice. So get nativepath.com/dailyclout. We'll let you stock up on Native Path Collagen for up to 45% off, plus free shipping. And you've got that 365-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. That's not the only amazing product these people have. You can also go to nativehydrate.com/dailyclout for the hydration product. Brian loves it. I love it. Many of us are dehydrated. It's hard to drink enough water. I didn't know this, but when you're dehydrated, you don't think as clearly. So be sure to also explore nativehydrate.com/dailyclout. Can't recommend these products enough. Lastly, thank you to Bioptimizers. There is one crazy times. I told you I was having trouble falling asleep last night. There is one phase of sleep that everyone fails to get enough of. And by the way, I hadn't taken my magnesium last night. The longer it takes to fall asleep, the more stressed out we get about being exhausted the next day. But once I started taking magnesium breakthrough, my sleep, and Brian's too, totally changed. And now I have no problem falling asleep. And he really suffered from sleeplessness. And we both now wake up refreshed and energized. Over 75% of the population is magnesium deficient. And what most people don't know is even if they're taking a magnesium supplement, they're still deficient because they're not getting all 7 forms. So magnesium breakthrough is the ultimate way to give your body all 7 forms of this important ingredient. So don't miss out on the most restorative, relaxing sleep ever. Also mood leveling with magnesium breakthrough. For an exclusive offer, use bioptimizers.com/dailyclout now and enter the promo code Daily Clout. Again, that's buyoptimizers.com/Daily Clout, and use the promo code Daily Clout. You'll get 10% off any order. You can subscribe, you'll get discounts and free gifts, and you'll make sure your monthly supply is guaranteed. So remember, everyone, if you like the Geneva Bible readings, it's, it takes resources to get these to you. We need editing, we need distribution, we need hosting, we need social media. It's rather costly. So when you support our sponsors, Bioptimizers, Native Path, and Birch Gold, you are helping us keep these readings coming and get them out to the rest of the world. So please do donate and subscribe to us at dailyclout.io. That helps us too, and helps us help you, bring you real independent news, legislative software that lets you change the laws from your phone, and also support me on Outspoken over on Substack by subscribing or donating. Thank you so much, and I will see you. I will try again tomorrow. Bye-bye.